Elena's fingertips trembled as she smoothed the buttery yellow onesie over the scarred wood of the kitchen table, her every movement magnified by the single overhead bulb that stuttered like a dying heartbeat. The refrigerator's low hum intertwined with the faint, insistent pulse of her baby's own heart, thump, thump, echoing through her chest, reminding her that time was slipping away. She snapped the tiny buttons closed, one by one, each metallic click resonating in the hush, before her gaze drifted to the cracked photograph perched beside the lasagna dish. In the photo, she and Michael smiled beneath summer fireworks, their joy frozen in time. Now a jagged fracture ran through his grin, as though grief itself had carved the glass. Steam curled off the cooling lasagna, carrying notes of oregano and Alton cheese that once signified comfort, but tonight felt like a taunt. From the hallway, a wash of cold blue light crept in, turning the colorful baby mobile dangling in the corner into a ghostly outline that swayed in an unseen breeze. Elena's heart clenched as she recognized the distant roar of her sister's laughter cutting through a sputtering political rant on the TV. Paige had always been the voice that filled this house when Elena only needed a hand. She pressed her palm flat to the table, as if anchoring herself against the surge of loneliness that threatened to pull her under. "I can do this alone," she whispered, though the words felt fragile on her tongue. The fetal heartbeat in her ears swelled a relentless drum, urging her forward, even as darkness tugged at the edges of her vision. She swallowed hard, willing her voice to be stronger than the tremble in her throat, and reached for the onesie again, an emblem of hope stitched together with fear. Behind her, the wall clock ticked toward midnight, each second a reminder that what she faced tonight would change her life forever. Elena's thumb froze above Michael's name, her breath catching as if the world itself had gone silent. When the message appeared, "I'm so sorry, it's Michael, he didn't make it." Her phone slipped from her numb fingers, twisting in midair, before clattering against the tile floor. The glass screen shattered into a spider web of cracks that radiated from the point of impact, as though each fissure marked a piece of her heart breaking. For a moment, all she saw was her own wide-eyed reflection fractured across those jagged lines. She knelt slowly to the ground, fingertips trembling as they traced the deep fissures in the glass, each one echoing the sorrow coursing through her veins. The cool tiles pressed against her knees felt unreal beneath her, a sharp contrast to the burning tears that streamed unbidden down her cheeks. Elena's phone lay face up on the floor, its broken screen still illuminated by Michael's final words she had hoped would say, "I'll see you soon," not, "He's gone." The lasagna on the table steamed unnoticed, its comforting scent now tasting like ash in her mouth. Time stretched as she stared at the shattered reminder of the love she had lost, the promise of a future torn apart in a single breath. Elena barely registered the next call, her father's gruff voice cutting through the haze of grief. "Come home, daughter," he barked. "Just for a while. Don't bring your problems into my house." The words hit her like a second blow, sharper than broken glass. In her mind, she saw herself hoisting a battered suitcase with one hand and cradling her swollen belly with the other, each step toward the front door heavy with doubt. The screen of her phone went dark as she ended the call, and the camera of her memory cut to the old porch light blinking off the door, swinging shut behind her with a hollow thud. Elena's shoulders sagged under the weight of his conditional invitation. Home was supposed to be sanctuary, yet his words made it sound like a trap. As she descended the creaking steps, suitcase tapping rhythmically against the boards, she wondered, would this family shield her in her darkest hour, or would they become the very force that destroyed her? Elena stepped into the dining room, where the table was set for 3, but spoke for none. The silverware gleamed under the chandelier as forks scraped plates in a hushed rhythm, each scrape louder than the ghosts of conversation that once filled this room. Her father sat at the head of the table, rigid and silent, eyes fixed on the folded napkin in front of him. Paige, across from Elena, scrolled through her phone, her fork pausing mid-air only to stab at a limp piece of broccoli before returning to the screen. Elena placed her plate down with a soft clink, the only announcement of her arrival. No one looked up. The scent of baked chicken and mashed potatoes drifted between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Elena lifted her fork and offered a small smile, hoping for a "How are you?" or "You look tired." But what came instead was a single strained breath from her father. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Any word would snap it. Paige sat beneath the glow of a circular ring light, her phone perched on a tripod, streaming live as glittery filters and floating hearts danced across the screen. She tilted her head, lips pursed into the perfect pout, and held up a sign painted with neon letters. "Followers are the only family I need." Her voice rang bright and confident, each word dripping with practiced charm. Behind her, a wall of plush pillows and fairy lights formed the backdrop of her studio, every detail curated to scream success and influence. Elena watched from the doorway, clutching her plate as Paige laughed at her own joke, another quip about hashtags and brand deals, then panned the camera to flash a close-up of her manicured nails. The comments scrolled by in real time. "Queen Paige, love your energy. Teach me your glow." Paige leaned forward and blew the audience a kiss, her smile dazzling enough to make the dim kitchen seem like a stage. Her father stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, the late afternoon light casting his silhouette into sharp relief. "Listen up, Elena," he said, his voice calm but icy. "Rule number 1, there's no crying at this table. Understood?" Elena's throat closed. She opened her mouth, felt the burn of tears, then swallowed. He paced a slow circle around the kitchen island, eyes never leaving hers. "Rule number 2, no whining about pain or discomfort. You're not sick, you're not injured, you're just a guest under my roof." The words landed like stones. She placed one hand over her swollen belly, the other pressed flat against the cool countertop, as if rooting herself to keep from collapsing. He paused, leaned in, as though sharing a secret. "And rule number 3, he added, voice dropping even lower, do not, under any circumstances, interrupt Paige's podcast." He nodded once decisively, then turned away and retreated into the living room without a backward glance. Elena remained frozen in the kitchen's dim glow. The clang of a spoon against her plate, the faint buzz of Paige's recording light, and the dull ache in her ribs made her feel smaller than ever. She closed her eyes, taking a shuddering breath, repeating the unspoken rules in her head like a mantra. No tears, no complaints, no interruptions. In that moment, she realized the home she had returned to was not a refuge, but a stage, where her suffering was neither seen nor allowed. The silence around her was no peace, it was a cage. Elena's fingers closed so tightly around Michael's silver wedding band that the metal bit into her skin, leaving a pale indentation that throbbed in time with her heartbeat. She pressed the cool circle against her palm, the friction between metal and flesh sending a jolt of memory through her nerves. Michael's laugh echoing in sunlit rooms, his hand brushing hers with tenderness. But tonight, that gentle intimacy felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost and everything she was about to risk. The soft scrape of the ring shifting in her grip sounded unnaturally loud in the oppressive hush of the kitchen, each whisper of metal on skin a warning siren. In that moment, Elena's pulse accelerated, her knuckles whitening as if bracing for impact. The polished surface glinted in the dim light, reflecting not hope, but a dark promise that the same hands that once cherished her could become instruments of pain. Elena glanced up at the kitchen clock, 11:57 p.m. The second hand stuttered its uneven tick-tock, twisting through the silence like a warped film reel. In that moment, her body betrayed her. The first contraction hit with a sudden electric jolt beneath her ribs. It felt less like pain and more like an alarm bell shrieking inside her abdomen, each pulse sending waves of white-hot urgency through her spine. She pressed a hand to her belly, breath hitching as the world narrowed to that single tick-tock, tick-tock, each echo magnifying the dread pooling in her chest. The flickering bulb overhead cast long, trembling shadows across the tiled floor, and the refrigerator's low hum seemed to warp in response, becoming a sinister undertone to her body's frantic warning. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Elena staggered toward the hallway, clutching her abdomen as another wave of pain crested through her. "Dad," she called out, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. The camera glided past the kitchen threshold, into the narrow corridor, capturing cracked wallpaper and the dull glow of hallway sconces. Each step echoed against the linoleum floor, but there was no reply, only the roar of the TV spilling political fury from Paige's room. The muffled voice thunder seeped under the closed door. "Must stand for the truth. This country can't survive weak voices." Elena's knuckles whitened as she rapped on the doorframe. "Dad!" Her plea was swallowed by the booming pundits inside the digital ring light's glow flickering through the crack around the door. The hallway felt impossibly long and isolated, as though she'd walked into a vacuum that rejected her need. She pressed her forehead against the cool wood, whispering, "Please, someone," but only the cacophony of talking heads answered back. The kitchen light snapped on behind him, casting her father's towering silhouette into sharp relief against the flickering bulb. He filled the doorway like a storm cloud, broad shoulders, braced jaw set. Elena could feel the air crackle as he took a step forward, boots echoing on the tile. Before she could plead again, his voice boomed, "Hold it till morning." The words struck her like a sledgehammer, reverberating through her very bones. She froze, breath caught in her throat as pain and fury warred within her. His backlit figure loomed larger with every heartbeat, and she realized there was no tenderness in his command, only cold iron rule. The ring of his voice filled the room, drowning out her stifled sobs and the frantic pulse of her own body's alarm. For an instant, Elena saw him not as her protector, but as the judge of her suffering, sentencing her to endure until dawn. As Elena's legs buckled, the camera slipped into slow motion, every frame stretched into a chilling tableau. Her father's hand shot forward, fingers coiling around her dark hair like steel cable. The handheld shot wavered as he yanked her head back, the screen pinging with the metallic rasp of his grip. Elena's shriek was a raw slice through the tension, but even pain could not drown out her sister's giddy laughter. Paige lifted her phone ring light halo, casting her face in artificial glow as she captured every moment for content. Her lips curved into a triumphant grin, while Elena's forehead smacked against the cold tile. A thin line of blood bloomed on Elena's knee where it scraped against the floor, deep crimson that spread like ink through grout. The camera lurched forward, catching Elena's hand clenched into the onesie, the silver ring digging into her palm, and her father's silhouette shifting with brutal intent. In that elongated heartbeat, horror and humiliation fused into a single, unforgettable frame. The front door burst open with a violent crack that seemed to split the very silence of the house. A savage gust of wind tore through the kitchen, snatching up stray napkins and rattling the ring light's fragile base in the next room. Elena's body was flung forward like ragdoll, her feet skidding helplessly across the cold tile as she tried in vain to catch her balance. The fetal heartbeat pounded in her ears. Thump, pause, thump. Each uneven pulse a mocking echo of her frantic breaths. She felt the bite of frozen air on her exposed skin, saw her breath erupt in white clouds before vanishing into the darkness beyond. Snowflakes and brittle leaves swirled around her legs, caught in the swirling eddies of the draft that stole the warmth from her bones. Her hip struck the stone threshold with a grinding crack, pain flaring like wildfire across her body. She collapsed to her knees, stomach pressed raw against the hard surface, every gasp of air a fresh stab. Behind her, the door thundered shut with a final, unforgiving thud, severing her from any hope of sanctuary. The last warm glow of the kitchen light winked out as the hallway fell into pitch-black silence. In that instant, the fetal heartbeat stuttered once more. Thump, silence, and the screen bled into darkness. Snow swirled in a frenzied dance under the streetlight as the battered front door slammed shut, leaving Elena huddled on the icy threshold. A car's high beams cut through the blizzard like twin searchlights, painting the swirling flakes silver. The vehicle skidded to a halt, tires crunching against the frost-hardened earth. A nurse's figure emerged from behind the windshield wipers, tall, steady, resolute. Lorraine yanked open the passenger door, her crisp uniform a sharp contrast to the chaos. Frost clung to her shoulders, and her cheeks were wind-burned pink, but her eyes shone clear with purpose. She knelt down beside Elena, slipping an arm under her trembling side. "I've got you," she said, voice firm yet gentle over the howl of the wind. The camera lingered on Lorraine's face, stern lines softened by concern, brows knit with determination. A single droplet of snow melted on her cheek as she lifted Elena into the car, wrapping her in a borrowed coat that smelled of antiseptic and resolve. Through the windshield, the kitchen light blinked once before disappearing, but Lorraine's headlights held back the darkness, offering the first flicker of hope Elena had felt all night. Elena's body shook with each jolt of the car as Lorraine floored the accelerator, tires squealing on the ice-crusted road. Inside the cramped passenger cabin, the heater struggled against the Arctic chill, and Elena's labored breaths came in ragged gasps. She gripped the door handle so hard her knuckles turned white, a low moan escaping her lips with every contraction. Lorraine kept one hand on the wheel and the other on her phone, her thumb flying over the screen as she barked into the headset. "Code OB, 39 weeks, crowning. ETA, 2 minutes, prep the OR." The windshield wipers flailed in frantic arcs, trying to clear the swirl of snow that danced across the glass. Lorraine's eyes stayed fixed on the road, voice steady despite the urgency. "Stay with me, Elena. Breathe through it. You're doing great." Elena's head lolled against the headrest, sweat matting her hair to her forehead. The rhythmic shout of thump, thump in her ears, replaced by Lorraine's calm commands. Every bump in the road sent a shock through her spine, each surge of pain met only by Lorraine's unwavering grip on the wheel and the hospital line crackling with readiness. Elena's hand dropped from the handle to grasp Lorraine's arm. "Please, faster," she whispered. Lorraine nodded, switching lanes with precision, heart racing but hands unshaking. Ahead, the hospital's glowing sign cut through the storm like a beacon of salvation. Lorraine hit the brakes with authority, and before the world could spin again, she was dragging Elena out into the warmth of the emergency bay, her phone still clipped to her ear, feeding the team critical updates. The room smelled of antiseptic and warm blankets as Elena lay back on the crisp hospital sheets, her breath ragged and drenched in sweat. Around her, nurses and doctors moved with practiced urgency, gloves snapping, instruments clinking, yet everything faded into the background the moment the distant first cry pierced the air. It began as a high, tinny wail that trembled with new life, then swelled into a robust scream that filled the sterile space with raw, triumphant sound. Elena's hands, slick with sweat and trembling, tightened around the blanket. Her vision blurred as tears welled up, hot droplets, tracing tracks down her cheeks. Pain and relief collided in her chest. Every contraction that had threatened to tear her apart moments ago now felt sanctified by that single cry. A nurse laid the newborn on Elena's chest, and the baby's tiny fists flailed against her clammy skin, body curled in instinctive trust. Elena bent to press her forehead against his closing her eyes against the sting of tears that were neither purely sorrow nor purely joy, but a molten blend of both. Another muffled sob escaped her lips as she whispered into the downy softness of the swaddled infant, "Welcome to the world, my chance." The camera lingered on the glistening tear framed against Elena's skin, capturing the moment when agony and ecstasy fused. In that close-up, you could almost hear the echo of her broken heart healing stitch by stitch with each pulse of her son's life. ChatGPT Dawn Elena cradled her son against her chest, the world narrowing to the soft rise and fall of his tiny lungs. Lorraine hovered nearby, gown rustling as she stepped forward with a pen and birth certificate form. Ink smudged her fingertips as Elena scrawled a single word across the blank line: chance. She paused, lifting her tear-blurred gaze to meet Lorraine's steady eyes. In that moment, two women, one born to motherhood and one who'd chosen compassion over convenience, shared a look that spoke volumes. Lorraine smiled, voice thick with emotion. "The greatest chance," she said, brushing a strand of hair from Elena's forehead, "is that you get to be his mother." Elena's fingers trembled as she handed back the form. "He deserves every opportunity," she whispered, her voice cracking. Lorraine placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder, anchoring her in the gravity of the moment. Outside, a new morning threatened to break, but inside that room, a new life had already begun, baptized by pain and named by hope. The phone on the bedside table buzzed with urgent insistence, its screen flashing "Dad" as voicemail notifications piled up. One after another, Michael's ringtone collided with snapping beeps of unanswered calls. Elena's chest tightened at the thought of his voice, the same voice that had cast her out into the cold, echoing through the sanctuary of new life. She reached out, thumb hovering over the screen, and pressed mute. Instantly, the room fell into a profound hush, broken only by the soft, steady beep, beep, beep of the fetal heart monitor. In that deliberate rhythm, there was both comfort and refusal, a heartbeat unbroken, resilient against every expectation he had tried to impose. Elena closed her eyes and rested her palm on her son's crib, letting the monitor's pulse become her answer. No ringtone could pierce this silence, nor any plea from the past undo the new world she had built. A narrow hallway of bunk beds stretched before Elena, the camera gliding in a slow tracking shot beneath the flicker of neon tube lights. Each mattress was covered in well-worn blankets and mismatched pillows, stories of countless arrivals etched into every fold. Despite the harsh buzz overhead, the room felt strangely alive. Women hushed each other with gentle smiles as they finished tucking children into cribs or offering extra diapers. Elena navigated between the bunks, Chance swaddled against her chest, the soft rise and fall of his breathing a comforting counterpoint to the shelter's hum. A new arrival, a young mother with dark circles under her eyes, paused her own routine to offer Elena a reassuring nod, then slipped a hand into the pocket of her coat to produce a small packet of baby wipes. Another woman, her arm wrapped in a cast, passed Elena a steaming cup of tea balanced on a chipped tray. In that fleeting exchange, Elena felt a warmth more profound than any home she'd known. The camera continued its smooth arc, capturing the tapestry of shared resilience. A woman humming lullabies to her toddler, a volunteer folding fresh towels with practiced care, whispered words of, "You're safe here," hanging in the air. Under that buzzing neon glow, Elena realized this was her sanctuary, imperfect, makeshift, but brimming with solidarity. In every nod and every borrowed comfort, the promise of a fresh start took root. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed as Elena scrubbed plates in a relentless loop, suds swirling down the drain like fragments of her old life. Steam rose around her, mingling with the clang of dishes and the clatter of cutlery. Cut. She sat at a scarred library table, dusty GED prep books spread wide, red pens circling grammar rules and algebra formulas. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight as she shaded in multiple choice bubbles, determination set in her jaw. Cut. Outside, snow fell in thick sheets as she pushed Chance in his stroller, wheels crunching through drifts while her breath puffed white in the frigid air. Each step forward was an act of will. Cut. Back in the diner, she rinsed an endless stack of coffee cups, glancing at the time 3:47 a.m. before grabbing a worn notebook to jot budget calculations between orders. A heartbeat lo-fi track pulsed, thump, 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 matching her racing pulse as she switched from suds to study to stroller without pause. In every shot, fatigue and resolve intertwined, forging a woman rewriting her future one night at a time. Elena's laptop rested on the wobbly folding table in the shelter's common room, its screen glowing against the dim neon. With a practiced click, she opened the folder labeled Evidence, watching rows of files 2019-0407 voicemail.mp3, 2019-0410 letter. PDF, 2020-0112 stack neatly in timestamp order. She double-clicked the first voicemail file and the waveform pulsed to life. A distorted male voice crackled through her headphones. "Trespassing on my property. Unbelievable." The single word rang like metal on metal. She fast-forwarded, cueing the next clip, this time her father's familiar sneer. "Drama queen since birth, always making a scene." The speaker icon bounced with each barb. Elena paused, eyes closing, as the insult settled in her chest like ice, then skipped to the third file. The voice was softer, but no less cruel. "You've totally overreacted, didn't you?" Each accusation etched itself into her heart and into her digital archive. She hovered over a new folder, Letters, but lingered on the evidence directory, knowing that every byte of data was a piece of her unwritten story. The camera zoomed in on her reflection over the keyboard, her silhouette framed by lines of text. Timestamp, 2021-07-15-22-03. Dad, trespassing. Elena exhaled, determined. This digital journal wasn't for revenge. It was her shield, her proof that her pain was real, and that one day the world would see the strength she'd forged from every cruel word. Elena paused in her digital archives, cursor hovering over a grainy screenshot titled Paige_Porch.png. In the cramped glow of her laptop, she replayed the moment Paige's triumphant grin as Elena lay collapsed on the icy porch, strands of hair tangled in her father's grasp. The screenshot captured every cruel detail, the flash of ring light on Paige's lips, the mocking sparkle in her eyes, the jagged crack of the front door framing the scene. Elena renamed the file truth.jpg and dragged it into a folder labeled Flashback. With that simple act, she reclaimed the narrative. No longer would that image exist only in her memory. Now it stood as irrefutable proof of her family's betrayal. She sat back and exhaled, fingertips lingering on the trackpad. In that frozen image lay her pain and her power, the moment she chose to stop hiding the truth and start demanding justice for herself and for Chance. Elena sat on the edge of her narrow bunk, Chance asleep in her arms, as her phone buzzed with one final notification. Her thumb hovered over the email icon before she opened it, and the subject line greeted her like a beam of sunlight through a storm cloud. "Congratulations, accepted tech apprenticeship program." The default male ding sounded impossibly loud in the hushed shelter, a sharp electric note that set her heart hammering. She blinked, rereading the message header as if it might dissolve like a mirage, then scrolled down to the details. Tuition fully covered, on-site childcare provided, a clear path into a high-paying career she had only ever dared to dream of. Elena's breath caught. The air seemed to pulse with possibility. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling the rapid thump of her newly hopeful heartbeat echo through her ribs. Below the congratulatory text, a link invited her to schedule an orientation call. Her fingertip trembled but moved steadily to tap it, unleashing a wave of adrenaline that coursed through her veins like wildfire. For the first time in years, every late-night dishwashing shift, every margin she'd covered in greasy budget notes, and every tear she'd poured into her digital journal crystallized into this singular moment, a turning point. She tightened her hold on Chance, brushing a strand of his hair from his forehead, and a fierce smile blossomed on her lips, quiet but unstoppable. In the stillness of that moment, Elena knew her journey had vaulted to a new height. The world was finally opening a door, and she was ready to step through. Elena sat at a scuffed plastic table in the shelter's break room, Chance happily clacking wooden trains together at her feet. Steam curled from her mug of lukewarm tea as she helped him build tunnels and bridges. The world felt quiet until her phone buzzed sharply against the metal tabletop. She picked it up, thumb trembling over the screen, and answered. On the other end was her father's voice, tight and unsteady. "Elena, your sister's hospital." His words fractured like brittle ice. Elena's heart lurched. She pressed Chance close as he looked up with wide, curious eyes. The train cars fell silent on the linoleum. "What happened?" she whispered into the phone, her voice hoarse. "Is she okay?" Her father cleared his throat, the line crackling. "She collapsed. It's serious. They want you here." Elena swallowed hard, chest tightening against panic, and something colder. She glanced at Chance's innocent grin, then back at the phone. "I'll be there," she said, voice firm despite the tremor she couldn't hide. Before she could end the call, a final plea crackled through. "Please, she's asking for you." Elena's gaze slid to the wooden tracks scattered at her feet, symbols of the refuge she'd built here. Then she stood, wrapping Chance in her arms as if to shield him from the storm. The break room's harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead as she whispered, "Let's go." Elena held the phone to her ear, eyes fixed on a distant point as the world around her emptied. Her lips pressed into a thin line, cheeks drained of color, every flicker of emotion sealed behind a mask of steel. The restless bustle of the break room faded away. Chairs scraping, distant chatter replaced by a single steady drumbeat that thudded through the soundtrack like a funeral march. In that heartbeat-long silence, her pulse slowed, moral outrage and dread coalescing into cold resolve. Chance's small fingers curled around her sweater as she stared ahead, face unmoving, as though the news had crystallized her heart into ice. The deep drum pat, thump, 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 echoed her newfound composure, each beat a reminder that she was no longer the frightened girl her family once cast aside. Paige's message appeared on Elena's screen, each word illuminated like a desperate beacon in the dark. "Paige, I see it now. Please come." Elena's breath caught. Her thumb hovered just above the text field as memories flooded her mind. Paige's mocking laughter under the porch light, the feel of frozen tiles against her knees, the sting of betrayal that had cut deeper than any winter chill. Behind her, Chance cooed softly, offering a gentle reminder of her new purpose. She paused, considering every syllable. The line between compassion and self-preservation had never felt so thin. The weight of her own scars pressed against her rib cage, yet she recognized the pain in her sister's plea. With deliberate calm, she tapped out her response, "Elena, I don't want to derail your recovery." Her fingers lingered on the send icon before she swiped, locking the screen in one smooth motion. The phone's vibration thrummed in her pocket, but she let it be. Rising to her feet, Elena gathered Chance into her arms and squared her shoulders. No more doubts. She would honor Paige's pain without sacrificing her own hard-won peace. Elena's phone chimed again, but this time it wasn't a voicemail or a text, it was an email from her mother. She tapped to open it, and the screen went pure white as the message loaded. In stark black type, it read, "Dear Elena, we are finalizing the sale of the family home. The buyer has requested your birth certificate for the historical record. It's framed in the study. Please come to sign the closing papers at your earliest convenience. Love, Mom." The words swam before Elena's eyes as the room's silence was shattered by the rapid-fire click-click-click of her own fingers pounding the keyboard in the next virtual pane, drafting a reply she would never send. She imagined the study's dusty shelves, the once familiar framed documents mounted like trophies over the fireplace. Her heart thudded in her ears. Outside chants stirred in her arms, but all she could see was that empty frame waiting for her name. The cursor blinked on the "to" line. She closed her laptop with a snap, the white glare vanishing in an instant. The only sound left was her own breath and the faint echo of keys still vibrating in her memory. Elena snapped her laptop shut with a decisive click, the white glare of the email vanishing into darkness. For a moment, all she could hear was her own breath settling into a steady rhythm. She pressed her fingertips to her eyes, then peeled them open to reveal a spark of steel-gray fire burning in her gaze. In that instant, every late-night shift, every tear shed in secret, every keystroke cataloging betrayal crystallized into purpose. The frame in the study no longer held memories of shame. It would become her canvas of truth. Elena tucked the laptop into her bag, adjusted Chance against her shoulder, and squared her posture as though anchoring herself to an unspoken promise. She whispered under her breath, voice low but unwavering, "Time to end the silence my way." A final surge of adrenaline pulsed through her veins. The break room's fluorescent lights flickered one last time, then steadied as if bearing witness to her resolve. Elena stepped forward, each footfall silent but resolute, ready to walk back into the house that had cast her out and reclaim her story on her own terms. Elena's boots pressed into the time-worn boards of the front walkway, the wood creaking beneath each deliberate step. As she crossed the cracked threshold, the camera began a slow dolly in, gliding down the narrow hallway that had once felt like a protective cocoon, now a tomb of shattered trust. Faded floral wallpaper peeled in curling strips, its pastel petals long since dulled to ghostly grays. Dust motes hung heavy in shafts of weak sunlight, drifting like whispered memories of laughter and arguments that had echoed here. Her fingertips brushed a tarnished doorknob, leaving behind a trace of warmth she no longer needed. Family portraits leaned crooked on the walls, a younger Paige grinning at a birthday cake, Michael's arm slung around Elena's shoulder, their smiles frozen forever under layers of grime. Scuff marks scarred the hardwood where chairs had been dragged, evidence of dinners both mundane and devastating. A single cobweb trembled in the corner of a ceiling beam, its silken threads glinting like fragile hope. Despite the decay, Elena's silhouette filled the space with unwavering resolve. Her shoulders were squared, no longer hunched in fear. Her spine straight as the beam above. With each forward motion, the house seemed to shrink around her, its oppressive weight giving way to her growing presence. The air smelled of stale carpet and distant rain, but it could not dampen the fire in her eyes. In that moment, the small, dilapidated house transformed into the crucible for her final reckoning, an arena where every creak underfoot would bear witness to her truth. Elena stepped into the study, its heavy wooden door swinging open on creaking hinges. Her mother stood across the room, hand extended toward a glass-fronted frame perched on a scarred oak desk. Inside lay Elena's birth certificate, its edges yellowed with time, but the elegant script as crisp as the day it was penned. Elena swallowed hard as she crossed the room. The frame felt colder than the winter wind outside. Her mother's fingers lingered on the brass latch before Elena reached out her fingertips, brushing the smooth metal. A single soft ting rang out as the latch clicked open, an almost musical note that echoed in the hush. Elena lifted the glass door, the certificate sliding free with a whisper against the backing. She held the document close, its weight both familiar and foreign in her hands. Every line of ink told a story she had almost forgotten, but now she would reclaim it on her own terms. Elena held the framed birth certificate in one hand and the file, labeled truth.jpg, in the other, stepping up to the wall where the old frame hung crooked. With deliberate calm, she lifted the certificate out, then slid the photograph into the glass slot. The image of Paige's triumphant laugh on that icy porch replaced the official document. A close-up caught the moment Paige's bright eyes and smirking lips, ring light halo still visible, frozen forever above Elena's crumpled form on the threshold. Elena's fingers smoothed the photo's edges, aligning it perfectly within the frame. As she pressed it flush, a rapid heartbeat throbbed in her ears, thump, 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 then cut off, abruptly replaced by a charged silence that filled the room. In that stillness, the photograph glowed with undeniable truth. The moment her family abandoned her, now displayed as testament to her resilience and reclamation of power. Elena stood in the center of the study, the single overhead lamp casting her shadow long and rigid against the walls. She placed a steady hand over her chest, the other hanging loose at her side. Her voice cut through the heavy air, measured calm, yet carrying the force of every word she had ever swallowed. Silence is the loudest echo you'll ever hear. The room seemed to hold its breath. The muted tick of the wall clock faded into nothingness as her declaration settled like dust in a sunbeam. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the soft rustle of her coat as she pivoted on her heel. Then she began to walk. Her boots tapped firmly on the worn hardwood floor, click, 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 each strike resonating like a judge's gavel delivering final judgment. The photograph of Paige above the fireplace caught gleams of light, its once shaking surface now still bearing witness to Elena's verdict. As she passed the doorway, the study's heavy door swung closed behind her with a slow, resonant thud. Boom, sealing the room in a hush deeper than any reproach. Elena's figure receded down the hallway, shoulders squared, head held high. The echoes of her footsteps trailed off into the distance, a quiet symphony of resolve that left the house transformed, no longer a prison of unspoken pain, but a monument to her reclaimed truth. Elena's silhouette receded down the hall, the corridor's weak light fading behind her. She held Chance close, his small head resting against her shoulder, tiny fingers curled around her jacket. Each footstep softened as the carpet began muffling the echo of her resolve. At the threshold of the front door, she paused, glanced back once, then stepped out into the brisk air. The camera cut abruptly to the framed photograph on the study wall, the image of Paige's triumphant laugh frozen above the shattered doorway. The frame trembled slightly as the wind began to howl through the house, slipping under closed windows and stirring the edges of the photo like restless spirits. Branches scraped against the glass, and a low, mournful gust echoed through empty rooms. In that moment, the wind's wail became the room's only voice, carrying Elena's declaration of truth into every shadowy corner. The photograph rocked on its nail, then settled its stillness heavier than any sentence. The sound of the wind grew louder, folding itself into a single final breath. Then the screen faded to black. True strength often lies in the boundaries we set and the quiet choices we make. Elena's journey teaches us that self-worth isn't given by others, but claimed through our actions and values. Silence can be a powerful response. It honors your peace when words have failed. Reclaiming your story means turning pain into purpose, one deliberate step at a time. Whenever you face moments of betrayal or doubt, remember Elena's resolve. Protect your peace, document your truth, and never let anyone else define your worth. If Elena's story moved you, subscribe to Through Her Eyes and hit the notification bell so you never miss a powerful narrative of resilience. Share your own moments of quiet strength in the comments. Let's build a community that listens, supports, and grows together.